Okay, let's do it. All right, welcome back. We are game 3004 in the winter 2021 semester, and it is week 9, part 2 of our broadcast. And now we just finished talking about the alpha release details, and I'm going to go into something that I want to talk about today, which is quests. What the hell is a quest anyway? If you think about it, it is a task or a mission in video games. It could be a series of tasks or missions. And one of the things that you have to deliver for your alpha release is a quest system. So we'll talk about how to do that and what I'm expecting for you guys to do. So again, think about this as you have your character or your party or your group, or in this case, if you're doing a tower defense game, some kind of camera control that you're doing or whatever. And when you complete the quest, it unlocks certain things. It gives you unlocks some skills, or provides loot, or other kinds of things like that as well. So that is what a quest can be used for. And quests fall into a few categories. One of them is kill quests, kind of gather or fetch quests, or escort quests. And you can have more than one mission in a quest, and you can link those together to create a series of quests or whatever, or chains. And some types of quests are also called side quests, and those side quests, like you all know how they work, are they allow you to kind of explore different aspects of the game, but they're outside of the main story plot, usually how it works. So for your mobile game, the expectation is that and this is my recommendation also, is you create a quest, as an example, that is a tutorial quest. And we'll talk about that in a second. So when building a quest system, then we have to think about quests and tasks are the things that players need to complete. As an example, they get these achievements, if you will. And a quest can contain a list of one or more tasks or missions. Think of it that way as well, right? And tasks are normally defined by your game designer and are described through the unlocking requirements. So you might have some kind of unlocking requirement that allows you to go on the quest or whatever. And the first one, as an example that we're going to be talking about, is the tutorial quest, which is automatically unlocked for you guys, right? And in some cases, it's good to also provide the idea of task cancellation or quest cancellation. For example, in No Man's Sky, you can abandon your quest, you can abandon your missions and those kind of things. And so in other games as well, you can say, I don't want to do that anymore. Sometimes they also go out of scope where you say, quest failed, because let's suppose you kill the main character or something else and there's no way of completing the quest. Tutorials, we can look at those as mandatory quests. And if you look, normally they have some kind of mission complete rewards, or sometimes they unlock skills and those kind of things. A good example of how to do a UI for a tutorial, I'm looking at Apex Legends here, where you have these little checkboxes, and there's other ones like this in other games. Once you complete the quest, you have a check mark that basically says you've done that piece, as an example, and you bring up the quest UI. That's always visible to the player until they complete it. All right, so that's how it's very simple for you guys to create something that is visible to the player and that you can come up with that is fairly straightforward for your tutorial. And that'll satisfy the quest requirement or the quest system requirement for your game. All right, so Catherine says, is this in the requirements? Yes, they are. The quest system is required from the very first day. So if you want to look at that, if you look at the final project overview, right, which I shared with you guys, then if you look at this, the first day, I shared this with you guys in terms of roles and everything else. And then it talks about the general requirements for everybody. The one thing that I asked you about is, a mini-map, an inventory system, and so on. And then in the actual game itself, when we talk about making a quest system, it's something that's inside of the outline, right? Sorry, Kat. It's in the outline, which is baked into our system. I'm just going to bring that outline up here for a second. Here's the outline. And you can see that our quest system is right here on week 9. Right, so that's something that's in the outline. So that's what I'm requiring you to do. And the only requirement that you would have is your quest system will be something that you add into the second part, which is your alpha release for mobile.
Wait, I'm really confused. I'm not talking about the course outline. I'm talking about the requirement document for like the final project, and then each there's like the first level, second level, blah.
Oh,
all those. I just control F in those to like find quest. Quest is not mentioned.
Yeah, if you look at the so if you look at assignments, look at assignments, and if you go to alpha release, inside the alpha release document right here, you'll see that your quest system should be fully functional for this release, which is something that I put in. Right, so that it's only for the alpha release. It's not for the previous releases.
It would have been nice to know about that when we were planning the game 7 weeks ago.
Okay, I apologize. It's something that is that everyone would kind of come up with, but you can't really. It's just in terms of UI, it's for the second half of semester. So yeah, maybe what I'll do is for the Kat, thank you so much for that. What I'll do is I'll take that back, because when Alex and I planned this entire thing, we kind of planned out the requirements as carefully as we could. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to include those as common requirements up front. Sorry about that.
Okay. No worries. I mean, I guess, yeah, okay. It's just, okay. I guess changing requirements are an expected part of this job.
Yeah, I don't, honestly, I don't want to give you change in requirements. But one thing that, the good thing is, I don't think it's going to be that challenging to take care of, to be honest with you, because it's going to basically be a UI. You need to have some kind of way of saving and loading data anyway. And it's going to tie in nicely to the inventory system, the way you save data with inventory, as other things too. So it's up to you. But I recommend a tutorialization anyway for the game. So I think it'll be an option. It'll be a great thing for you guys, right? So, and that will be the quest. The quest is how to make your game. How do you play? Kind of thing, right? What makes your game unique? All right. After it was done from the start, we had to redo for later submissions. We had a lot of animations for each scene, so this was a lot of work. Okay, so what do you mean by that, Daniel? What option scene did you have that I didn't detail the option screen for you early enough? Is that what you said? Well, the requirements for the option scene have been in place from the beginning, right? So that is something that is there, right? I'm pretty sure. But if it's not, like again, if somehow I missed it, I'll go through. And then we didn't have controls. We didn't have. Are you talking about for your on-screen controls, or are you talking about because you planned for a mobile game? Okay, remember the first half is what I've been talking about. Is your first half of semester is all WebGL, and the second half is all mobile. So for WebGL, you need options, right? You need the ability for you to give your player a chance to remap their keys, and do other kind of things like that as well. Especially things like, I don't know, inverted controls and that kind of stuff for gamepad, if you allow gamepad, and those kind of things. Okay, so anyways, that's the only thing I'd asked. But again, you can pull off a lot of that with your scriptable objects, which I'll talk about a little bit today. Okay, so any other questions around that stuff? I will take it back, though. I'll make those changes apparent a lot earlier, right? So, all right, let's do it. So tasks. Let's talk about tasks a little bit. So after you have a quest or whatever, you have different task states. So some of the task states could be pending, as an example, which is you haven't really met the unlocking requirements yet for a pending task, but what you're doing is, it's kind of something that is there. So you might have a bunch of states, and most of the quests that you'd have in your game would be pending. Haven't been picked up. They're not available yet because they haven't been unlocked. Unlocked means that, you've gone to a part of the world, or you satisfy the requirements of whatever the unlocking is. Example would be when you start the game, if you're going to do your quest for tutorialization, then it's automatically unlocked, because the first thing you're doing is you need to learn how to play the game, right? So that kind of thing is you're not only pending, but it's unlocked right away for your tutorialization state. So you don't really have to worry about pending for that one. And then when it's in progress, as an example, if you force everybody to do your tutorialization, or if you allow them to skip, then they can actually cancel the quest. Okay, and I'm going to put it out there for you guys, because imagine if your player has already done the tutorialization. Did my audio cut out? I think it's still working on my side. Michael, are you still hearing me or no? How about everyone else? Can you guys hear me? All right, thank you. All right, so yeah, so from it cut out for a few seconds. I'm sorry about that. But more or less, what my thoughts are is for in progress. So you're in progress. It's unlocked as soon as you start the game. But what if you don't choose to accept this one? You decide it's unlocked, but you decide not to do your tutorialization quest because you don't need tutorialization. You've already played the game, you know how to play, and you don't want help to start, right? So you can skip this thing by basically canceling the quest. And I think that's really the ability for you to do that cancellation. Completed is when you're done everything. Maybe what it does is it unlocks things like the ability for you to play the game. Apex Legends is an example of that. You can't play the game until you've done your tutorialization for the first time, right? And I think that's a bit of a limitation. I think that is, some people don't like that, where you're forced to do the tutorialization as opposed to starting the game. And there is a difference between completed and done, in that when you're completed, sometimes it's decoupled from being done, where you collect your reward, because sometimes you have to actually physically go to collect your reward at some other place as part of the quest. So you've completed it, but now you got to go get your reward, right? A good example of that is in Borderlands, where you're playing Borderlands. You've completed the quest, but you got to go back to the person that gave you the quest in order for you to have it completed. So that is, you're done. And finally, canceled. And canceled is, like I said, it's important if you want your quest to disappear, or if you want to be able to skip the quest. So this is where I don't feel like doing tutorialization. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to cancel, right? That kind of thing. All right, so that is task states. And it works nicely with something called scriptable objects. In fact, scriptable objects are great for a bunch of different things. Scriptable objects are a great way of saving and loading your data, which is required for this release coming up. Not this one for Sunday, but for the next release, which is your alpha release. That is when your scriptable objects your saving, loading, and pausing the game are all going to function at that point. And again, there's another great example of key mapping. You can also map those kind of keys as well. Any kind of keys that allow you to bring up a mini map, which is required. As an example, anything like that. If you want to swap keys with any of those things, then that is where you would bring up the ability for you to use different buttons. For mobile devices, when it comes to options like that, a lot of times I want them to appear differently on my screen. As an example, I want to move my buttons around. I want to be able to drag my button physically in a different position to suit my play style, right? That is a great option for mobile, because at the end of the day, if you don't allow that, then you're forcing a user to use a certain set of on-screen controls that may not work for their hands or may not work properly for their play style. All right, so that's an option for your on-screen buttons. All right, so scriptable objects, what they are is, instead of you saving and loading to a file, that's great for a game that's desktop or even, mostly desktop actually. But for WebGL, that doesn't work. And it doesn't work for a couple of reasons. One, you have no back end available to you for mobile, right? So that means that on mobile and WebGL, if I try and save a file, a brand new file, as an example, or I want to write to a file on a WebGL system, it won't allow it. Most backends, especially, or WebGL, unless you use a server to do that allows you to write stuff through server controls, it won't work. Why? Because most WebGL games function as client side. They have no server side backend at all, right? So saving something with standard C# controls, saving and loading, that would be terrible. Okay, it wouldn't work. You can also use a database. That is also another way of doing it. So connecting to something like, some kind of cloud platform. And a good example of a cloud platform that we use for mobile is Firebase. So I'm going to bring up Firebase as an example as an option. And Firebase is fantastic because what it allows you to do, and I'm just going to use just an example of this. Let's just use this as an example. If I go to documentation for Firebase, Firebase has support for all kinds of platforms. So it has guides for how to learn how to do it. And one of the great things about this is its support for mobile as well as for so it has it for for desktop as well as mobile, and it's got great kind of combined support for Unity. So Unity, there's some great support here for Unity. And I highly recommend if you're going to do something that's cross-platform that you need a database for, then you want to use something like Firebase for Unity. All right, so this is something that that you can use. But Firebase is, in my opinion, a little bit outside of our plan. And the reason for this is because it is kind of out of scope for what I've asked you guys to do. So that's why I don't recommend a backend database. But again, it does support iOS, Android, native, web, right? So that's Node.js, as well as Unity on, kind of right from the start. So if I click on Unity, it'll actually give you the ability for you to add Unity Firebase to your Unity app. But without that, let's suppose I don't have Firebase support, then something like Scriptable Objects is the way to go. And what this does is it allows us to create a prefab, right, that we can store inside of our project that is available on mobile and on desktop systems. And this is where I recommend this. And it can work great for things like the inventory backend. I want to keep track of all my inventory between loads, or I want to keep track of my inventory system as I play my game for my character and so on. I can do that, and I can store all the inventory instead of it being hard-coded or, as an example, in memory on the game. What if your game stops, you stop the game or whatever? How are you going to save that? Well, you can save different parts of your game inside of different scriptable objects, which is a great way of keeping track of everything. All right, so every time you instantiate a prefab, it's going to create its own copy of the data. So you have some basic data. And a good example of this would be something like, okay, I have my current properties. I want to do key mapping. Key mapping is a great, you can use scriptable objects for key mapping. It's a great, I would say, use case for it. So I keep track of all my keys in a scriptable object. And what I'm going to do is I have my default mapping that I want for my keys. And then I have my own custom mapping. So between screen loads, between me loading up the game again, it should automatically remember your, your selections, how you want to remap your keys, as an example, whether it's on WebGL or if you want to move them to different positions, like actually move your buttons in different positions on the screen, it should remember those things as well, right? So, and you should be able to go back to the default setup for your, for your project, right? So that's something that is really great for WebGL, right? So how do you use a scriptable object? Well, the use cases are the following. Some kind of saving and storing data during the editor session. So I want to make, for example, my defaults. I can do that during editor session and create my prefabs, right? I want to save and load data or, at runtime. This is a great way. And I can load large amounts of data or save large amounts of data. For example, my entire game state could be saved in a scriptable object, and this has nothing to do with a database. I don't have to worry about SQLite on a mobile device. I don't have to worry about device specifics or whether I'm on a platform that's WebGL or whatever. It doesn't have to be persistent. So it's not like I need a persistent connection to the internet or anything like that. It's fantastic. And I can use it for inventory systems. Here's an example of an inventory system where I have a longsword and I have, different a description for it, even a different icon for it if I want to put this in my inventory as an example, and how much it costs and all that kind of stuff. So you can kind of describe everything in the editor, not inside of, not hard-coded in the game. So you're not going to put it in a script. This is actually in the editor, an editor prefab that you're going to create here for different kinds of objects that you can load up. So you want to know how much damage a longsword does. You can store it as a scriptable object, which is kind of interesting. And also quest systems. For example, I want to have kind of different pieces of my quest. What comes first, what goes second, what goes third. I can piece it together. AI is another great way of using scriptable objects. I want to create behaviors for my AI. I want to create actions for my AI. I want to put them together. I can use scriptable objects for that. And I can use some kind of, whether I want to make my own decision tree, I can do that. Or if I want to use something like a, state machine, I can use the scriptable object in the state machine to go through. So that's what we're going to talk about. I'm introducing them this week, and I'm going to talk about them more next week because we need more time for scriptable objects to kind of come into play. Some great tutorials for scriptable objects that are out there is the one from Unity, gives you the basics, right? So if you wanted to read ahead on how to use scriptable objects, this is a great one. Getting started, wenderlich.com. They always have an amazing amount of great tutorials for Unity. So there's another one. And also there's a great one for MVC in Unity, so Model View Controller in Unity with scriptable objects that gives you the ability to build an inventory system. Both these two do actually, with scriptable objects in Unity. So really great work, and I think it's a good opportunity for you guys to learn how to do that if you don't know how to do it already. All right, any questions around the stuff that I've talked about today? That's all I wanted to introduce to you. During lab today, and this is in the second half. The first half we've already done this is we want to focus on converting everything to mobile. All right, so we're going to be talking about mobile touch again, mobile user interface, how to test with LD Player, and also testing with an actual mobile device. If we had time, I would get into this. We're not going to have time based on what I did earlier today. This took the majority of the time, just doing this part. Just to convert and test to make sure your controls, your on-screen controls worked with mobile compared to WebGL. All right. Any questions around anything that we've talked about so far today? All right. Thank you so much. That's it for the lecture. I'm going to see you guys in lab in 20 minutes. All right. Thank you so much, guys. I'll stop recording this now, and I'll see you guys in lab.